and Tua.
Oh, you went there. Yes.
Head coach and
okay,
Tua.
Let's get it.
They knew that they had a game on Thursday, right?
Yes.
So if he had to go through protocol, that's a 5-step, 5-day phase that you have to go through. Tua would have missed that Thursday game if he had to go through protocol. So I think they knew that game was coming up on Thursday. They didn't want to lose Tua. Tua is a great talent.
They're always going to say they're good, even when they know they're not good, especially in the heat of battle. They want to be out there with their team. We now move on to a topic that's near and dear to Sticks. Mm-hmm. I just found out, and that's Tua Tagovailoa and his injury that he suffered in Thursday night's game again. Well, his second injury that he's had with playing football Thursday night when he played the Bengals. So here's what we absolutely know about Tua Tagovailoa. Last week, the Miami Dolphins were playing the Buffalo Bills. Mm-hmm. In the first half, Tua Tagovailoa, he got hit where he was slammed to the ground and his head appeared to slam against the ground. He tried to get up and he stumbled a bit, shook his head, took a couple steps and fell again. Mm-hmm. He was removed from the game briefly where he was checked out and ultimately cleared to play in the second half. Mm-hmm. 4 days later, Tua Tagovailoa is starting for the Miami Dolphins against the Cincinnati Bengals on Thursday night. He again gets slammed to the ground, but this time it wasn't as pretty for him. He was stuck or frozen from an apparent head banging against the ground, and which ultimately he was carted off the field. Six, I got a couple questions for you about this, man. So,
what you got?
One, who do you think is responsible for this situation? And we can break it down and talk about them in different parts. But who do you think is responsible for this ultimately? Should there be any other suspensions or dismissals? Because we now know that the doctor that checked him out on the field for the Buffalo Bills has been fired or dismissed. And then how can this be prevented in the future?
So, yeah, man, it was ugly Thursday night for Tua, man. And first of all, on Sunday against the Bills, he should not have been allowed to come back in that game.
Absolutely.
Now, the fact that he, of course, him stumbling and holding his head, that was automatically a defining moment to say that this man has a concussion. Mm-hmm. So that's why he had to go in the locker room and go through protocol. Right. So to play the blame game, or who's involved and who should be blamed for this, there's 4 people. Mm-hmm. The team doctor,
okay,
the independent doctor, head coach, and Tua.
Oh, you went there. Yes.
Head coach and
okay,
Tua.
Let's get it. Yes.
So whenever he went back into the locker room, he has to. So first of all, talk about Tua. Of course, Tua is an athlete. I'm an athlete. Mm-hmm. I've had concussions in my day. You know what I'm saying? No, there's not many athletes that want to be hurt.
Right.
A lot of athletes, me included, when I was playing, I had a really bad shoulder injury. I had a grade 5 separation. If you know anything about separations, and most people don't, but grade 5 is the worst that you can get in a separation. I went up for a touchdown, caught a touchdown, fell on my shoulder, DB fell on top of me, separated, right? I knew something was wrong immediately, but I played it off. My arm dangling, going back to the sideline, the doctor puts his hand under my shoulder pads and immediately snatches away like, oh, like my shoulder bone, my clavicle was out of my skin. So they took my shoulder pads off, put it back together, and I was out for the rest of that game against St. Augustine's back in the day.
Okay.
Me, after that game that night, Saturday night, I'm thinking to myself, my season could be over. And I'm a senior at the time. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be hurt. So every Sunday we had to go to the training room and get checked out for any injuries, any new injuries, and get treatment, this, like, the third. I go in there like, hey, I'm good. My arm is straight. You know what I'm saying? I can go. Knowing good and damn well my arm is fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
So since I played it off so well, the only thing that the doctors did moving forward, because that was the 4th game of the season, we still had 8 left. So the only
Right.
thing the doctors did was they created this hard turtle shell that had padding underneath it, but it had a really hard surface on top. They
Mm-hmm.
put it on my shoulder, strapped that motherfucker down, put my shoulder pads on top of that, and gave me cortisone shots at halftime, well, at the beginning of the game, at halftime for 8 games straight. Because I didn't want to not play.
Right.
I didn't want to not play. The
Yeah.
pain after those games that I felt in my arm was crazy. Because my arm was fucked up.
That's
I needed surgery.
that's
You
a.
know what I'm
I
saying?
mean, it's the
So that's
same
the
as.
blame on Tua. That's the blame on Tua because I know that he was in the locker room like, nah, I'm straight. I'm straight. I can play. I can play. I can play. And then got the nerve to blame him stumbling on back and ankle injuries. No,
Yeah.
bruh.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
were concussed, bro.
right. And I appreciate you sharing that experience. It's a bit different than a head injury, especially in
Agreed.
today's climate in
Agreed.
professional sports, where they're so cognizant of somebody having a head injury and trying to protect that
Or at
person
least we, or
and the
so we
sport of
thought.
football. Right. So we thought, and the sport of football. But
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely I see the parallels are definitely there. Like you mentioned, no player wants to be hurt. They're always going to say they're good, even when they know they're not good, especially in the heat of battle.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be out there with their team, if they
With their
put
boys, with
in
their
the work
brothers. Yep.
with their boys, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you on this. I didn't think you were going
Yeah.
to say Tua,
Of
but
course. Yeah.
I'm with you. I think that definitely the doctor or doctors are responsible for this. The
Responsible
coaching
ultimately,
staff,
yes. Right.
yeah, right. The coaching staff is responsible for this, and Tua and his teammates are responsible for this. Not to the extent that the doctor and then the coaches are, because the
Mm-hmm.
doctors are the ones, whether a player says they're fine or not, they have to use their medical know-how and their skills that they've learned in school to determine if somebody is ultimately good or not. And
Mm-hmm.
then I can't blame the coaches as much as the medical staff, because they only
Mm-hmm.
go off of what the medical staff
Medical
tells them,
staff
but
says exactly.
they are responsible as well, because just like everybody else, they saw that man being woozy and shaky when he got up from that
Mm-hmm.
hit.
We
So
saw that.
they saw that. So they have to use their better judgment and not allow him to go back into the game. Wins and losses aside, we're talking about a person. We're talking about a person here, and the coach.
Mm-hmm.
While I do think he's remorseful, he has to have some accountability in this
Yeah.
situation as well.
Yeah, because he said Monday after the game on Sunday was that if there was any red flag that popped up during the evaluation with the coach and the unaffiliated the UNC, the unaffiliated neurological consultant, that's what that stands for. If there was
Hmm.
any red flag that they saw in that locker room, he would not have went back in that game, and that they went above and beyond to ensure that Tua was good to go to come back for that second half.
I can't believe that.
I can't believe it either because, and this is the thought that I had initially as soon as he came back in the game and they made that statement on Monday. The thought that I had was they knew that they had a game on Thursday, right?
Yes,
So if he had to go through protocol, that's a 5-step, 5-day phase that you have to go through. Tua would have missed that Thursday game if he had to go through protocol. So I
yes.
think they knew that that game was coming up on Thursday. They didn't want to lose Tua. Tua is a great
They didn't
talent.
want to.
Of course, he's
Right.
a
They didn't
great
want to put
quarterback.
him. Right.
Nope.
Right.
They didn't want to put him through protocol, that 5-step
Right.
protocol phase, and know that he was probably going to miss Thursday's game.
And so that's a good point, because I feel how does he not even go into protocol? Um, that's a good point, man. Because I wonder if they did have a Sunday game rather than a Thursday game, would they have at least put him in protocol
I
so
think
that
they
he
probably
can
would
get
have.
the constant monitoring and evaluation, rather than saying, "Oh shoot, we got a game third," and we don't know what was said
We
or
don't know
done in the
exactly.
locker room,
That's just speculation
but
by me.
but that's a good point, because if it's a 5-day protocol, at least they played on
Mm-hmm.
Sunday. It's 4 days removed from Sunday to play on Thursday. He definitely would have missed a game, not even had a chance to play, because he's still in
Mm-hmm.
protocol. He wouldn't have
He's
been able to
still in
get
protocol.
evaluated. So that's a good point. I didn't think of that. I did
So
not think of that at
now,
all.
so now that now, of course they didn't plan on him getting another concussion on Thursday. Of course they didn't plan on that, right?
Yeah, nobody
But
does.
now that concussion that he had, he wasn't healed from.
Yep.
So now he gets slammed to the ground, which, to be honest, whenever I saw the tackle against the Bengals on Thursday, it wasn't anything that hasn't happened to me before that I haven't gotten a concussion from. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because when he got tackled, he got sacked, his back hit first and then his head hit the ground. That's happened to
Yeah,
me before. And I
but
haven't
if
been
your
concussed.
brain is swollen from another concussion, the
Exactly.
smallest hit of that nature is gonna like put
That's
him in
the
the
point I
position
was
that he was
making.
in. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
the point I was gonna make, is that if he would have been in protocol, that second concussion, first of all, he wouldn't have been able to play, but that second
Right.
concussion would have never happened, to where he's in a fencing response where his body's locked up, and
Yep.
now he has to be carted off and spend the rest of the night in the hospital because y'all were negligent in the fact that he had a concussion initially. So
Right.
now he's going to go through protocol now, because why? They don't play today. They don't play
Right.
for another 11 days. So he can
Yep.
go through those 5 days of protocol, not practice, and go through protocol safely, and then come out 6 days removed to be able to practice and get ready for next Sunday, which is the
Yep.
9th.
Yep.
So I think, honestly, that him going back in the game on Sunday and that response on Monday was planned, because they knew they had a game on Thursday. They wanted him to play in, and they knew they
I
weren't
did
going to have
not think
another
of that.
game until 11 days later. That's
I did not
probably
think
why
of
that
that.
happened. Because, bro, like, phase 1 is rest. Phase 2 is gradual progress towards exercise. Phase 3 is increased exercise, but only cardio. Phase
Mm-hmm.
4 is the player can do non-contact activities, and phase 5 is the physician has to clear him before he
Mm.
can do physical activity. So if he's
Yep.
not cleared after that 5th phase, he has to go through phase 5 again.
I got you.
You see what I'm saying? So they didn't want him to miss Thursday, which is why they put him back in the game Sunday and released that statement on Monday. But now everybody is coming to it to where they're like, okay, the NFLPA is now in this shit now, because it's one of their brothers. The Players
Mm-hmm.
Association, they try their hardest to take care of the players.
Yep.
And now that UNC has been dismissed now, or fired, because the NPA was like, yo, they're not taking care of our brother.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that they didn't see that hit on Sunday and say, okay, Tua does not need to come back in this game.
So do you
Even
think
if it,
any?
go ahead,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry. No, no. Go ahead.
Now, even if they didn't put him through protocol, they at least should have took the proper steps to say, okay, he's not he has a head injury, so we
Mm-hmm.
have to at least say he's not coming back in this game, and then we'll reevaluate tomorrow and see and reassess if he needs to go through protocol. That's what they at least should have done on Sunday,
Right.
but they
Right.
didn't do that. So now they're like, they're not taking care of our brother. We got to get him out of here.
So now with all the heat on this situation, and we again, like I mentioned earlier, we know that, and you mentioned as well, we know that neurological doctor
Mm-hmm.
was dismissed. You think anybody else needs to be dismissed, suspended, fined in this situation?
Um, I would say I think he really is because the relationship between the UNC and the team doctor is that the team doctor is supposed to assess the player because he knows the player. He sees the player every single day. So if anything in his personality is different, he can give the UNC that insight, like, hey, I understand that you don't know Tua, but I know him and he don't seem right now. He's not himself. The
Mm-hmm.
UNC is there to say, okay, he's there to do additional steps to say, okay, he does have this brain trauma. He's showing a lot of different. He's showing a lot of side effects from a concussion. They're supposed to work together.
Yep.
So if anybody else needs to be either fired or fined, it's the team doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Tua went through what he went through. He don't need no other repercussions.
Right.
But
Right. Right.
and excuse me. And Coach McDaniel, like you said earlier, he's only going off what the doctors say. So if anybody else needs to be reprimanded, it needs to be the team doctor. They already got the UNC up out of there. The team doctor needs
Yep.
to take some responsibility for what happened to Tua as well, I believe.
So I'm a bit different than you on this.
What you
I
think?
think I think along with your thoughts, I think the team doctor needs to be suspended, at least a game, maybe even
Mm-hmm.
fined.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think the coach needs to be
You think Mr. McDaniel
um,
needs to be fined as well?
suspended, or yeah, at least fined for a game,
Mm-hmm.
because we look at let's take what happened Thursday out of the scenario, and let's
Mm-hmm.
just say Tua. That's a bad example. Let's say Martrez Burfitt, and that's his name, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's use his situation where he had that hit
Antonio Brown.
on Antonio Brown, which we also
Mm-hmm.
can talk about that down the
Yeah,
line
for
as
sure.
well. Um, he was suspended. He was fined for negligence on the field, right? And
True.
that's something that, I mean, we don't know what his true intent was. It looked like he intended to do that. Hold on, wait, hold on. It
Oh,
looked
I
like
got
he
you. I
intended
got
to
you.
do that,
Okay.
but there are players that do not intend to do that and they get fined, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get
Yeah.
fined for it. So I'm
For the
saying what
targeting. For
we
targeting.
for
Yeah.
targeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's $25,000 out of their check in most
Mm-hmm.
cases.
Exactly.
So what I'm saying is, if you're not going to suspend players, you need to hold the parties off the field in these scenarios that Tua just had. You need to
Mm-hmm.
hold them just as accountable as you holding the players accountable. Find their ass, and then you'll start to clean this stuff up to where
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna take a second guess, like, well, hold on, this is money coming out of my pocket now. Let's make sure that he's good before he goes back out there, because if
Mm-hmm.
that happens, it's all, when you want somebody to do what you need them to do, you
Mm-hmm.
always mess with a paycheck.
Agreed.
Everybody knows that.
Agreed.
Everybody
Mess with their
knows that.
money.
So
Mm-hmm.
when you mess with somebody's money, you get their attention, and
For sure.
that's how I think this is fixed moving forward. Is
Mm-hmm.
you start finding the personnel off the field that is in charge of this, just like you do the personnel on the field.
Agreed. I agree with you. I agree with you to a certain extent on that. I just so going back to the Vontez Burfict thing, the targeting rule was created somewhat because of Vontez, because he had a history of targeting people.
Hmm.
He had a history of doing that. So whenever he got fined, whenever he hit Antonio Brown, it was because he had a long history of these type of hits.
Okay.
So that's why he was fine. I think if it was the first offense, he wouldn't have been fine. Honestly, if he was the first
Well,
offense, it wouldn't have been fine.
but after
But
that rule was made, for at least for a couple of years, individuals were fined for
and they
it,
still being fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
intent to do it or not. They were being
Intent, yeah,
fined.
intent to harm. They're being fine. I agree.
Right.
I agree.
So
Well,
what I'm
intent or
saying,
not, they're being fine. Correct.
exactly. So what I'm saying is, at least for some years, if the NFL really wants to get this in line and get this in check, as they have been trying to do with concussions for the last 10 years, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to save the game of football, because it was dying for a bit, because parents didn't want their kids playing football because of the threat of concussion and ruin their lives down the line, which that is a real
Mm-hmm.
thing. But
It's a
football
real
isn't the
thing. I'm gonna
only
talk about
sport.
that too.
Yeah, football isn't the only sport that has that issue. um, if they want to get this in check, they need to start doing that. And so
Mm-hmm.
the question then comes is, okay, well, if the NFL does it, how, if the NFL puts this in place, how does the leagues underneath the NFL, so college and high school sports, put that into place? That I don't have the answer to, but I know the NFL, they make certain amount of dollars. If you start taking their money, it makes them really take a look at what they're doing and who they're clearing and who they're not clearing, and before they let people out on the field.
For sure, for sure. And I mean, just to kind of get my final thoughts on it, the these two injuries call for serious concern for Tua's future, because CTE, which is chronic traumatic, the last word I can't really pronounce it, encephalopathy. I can't pronounce it, but
Yeah, yeah, I don't.
it's CTE. That
Yeah.
joint is scary because we've had major, like, rest in peace, Junior Seau. He had
Mhm.
CTE. He took his life because of it. And we talked about Luke Kuechly in the back in the first episode when we
Man,
were talking about
Tateo.
Tua. I'm at Tateo. He ended his career early because of concussions.
Right.
He was an amazing linebacker for the Panthers and was crying in his retirement speech because he didn't want to leave, but he felt
But he
like it
had
was the
to.
best thing for his family because of the head trauma that he was getting, and he was afraid of CTE. CTE has people, like, basically handicapped now because of the
Hmm.
head trauma and the enlarging of the brain, and they can't function. They forget things. It's like early onset dementia kind of, sort of, with CTE. So, and we just like you touched on Antonio Brown. This dude, ever since that hit from Vontez Burfict,
Right.
been bugging out,
Right.
been doing wild shit, and like,
Right.
because I pray for Tua, because hopefully, these things don't continue to happen to him. Of course, we don't wish it upon him, but the negligence that the coaches, the doctors, and even himself had with this injury is crazy. Like, it could cause some concern for his future, man, because these head injuries ain't nothing to play with, man. Ain't nothing to play with.
So
Nothing to play
coming
with.
from you, how does the NFL fix this? How do they fix it moving forward? Or how do they keep
They
this
just
from happening down the line?
they just have to be more careful, honestly, because it's really, because you're taking the word, the biggest word that these doctors are coming from. The doctors need to be more careful, number one, but they can't. They have to take the player's word with a grain of salt. No player is going to want to not play. No player, especially if you're a player at the level of Tua or somebody like that, a starting quarterback in the NFL. No player is going to want to feel like they let their brother down on the field. No player is going to want to do that. I was one of those guys. I'm pretty sure you might have been one of those guys too. No player.
Some people would say not.
Some people would say no. Well, coach,
I was always hurt. Yeah, I was always hurt, man.
But man, you're my brother. I wanted you to be healthy regardless of anything else.
Yeah. You're right.
But it's like the doctors can't take. The doctors have to be a lot more mindful of these injuries and keep these players off the field regardless of what they say. They're always going to want to play. They're never going to want to sit out. So the doctors have to be a lot more mindful and have to be a lot more careful in these situations. And they have to take the power from the player and the coaches and say, he's not well. They have to do that. If they don't, these situations are always going to keep occurring because the coaches want the player out there and the player wants to be out there. If the doctors don't take control and take the reins of these situations, these things are always going to happen, man. And this has been an ongoing. What year did that Will Smith movie come out about CTE? You remember?
Ooh,
it had to be over a decade ago at this point, right?
It was like 2007, 2012.
I'm about to go look it up. Hold on. Because this was, and the problem had been before this. Concussion came out in 2015, 7 years ago, and the problem has been going on well before this. Well before this, bro. Like Junior Seau retired over a decade ago.
Yeah.
And he was having issues with CTE. Like, there's so many players have retired early. There was I can't remember his name for nothing in this world, but he left the NFL after his third year because he was afraid of CTE.
His rookie year. I know you're talking about. I don't remember his name either.
It was his rookie year.
We might be talking about a different person.
I think we might be talking about the same person.
But
was he a fullback or linebacker?
Yes,
yeah,
fullback.
There you go.
So okay, yeah. So he left after his rookie year.
His rookie year. Okay, got you.
Yeah,
because he was afraid of concussions.
I can't remember.
Yeah. So, but I mean, this it's a scary thing, man, because I've had concussions in my life. I've been knocked out before, and the crazy thing is whenever when me and D-Lo were playing football, the CTE situation wasn't as followed or studied as much. So whenever I got knocked out, I played the next Saturday and probably shouldn't have.
Right. But the thing is, you played the next Saturday. That's a whole week away.
That's a whole week away. True.
4 days after.
But if there was a protocol and I didn't pass that fifth phase, I probably couldn't play the Saturday.
Right. Exactly.
But there was no protocol back in the day. None. Right. They were like, "Hey, you good? Shake your head a little bit, put some dirt on it, rub some castor oil on it. You good? How many fingers I got up? You said 4, but I only got up 2. You good? Don't worry about it. Sure.
You're all right.
They just let you go. You know what I'm saying? Because but a lot of that comes from the player too.
That was education back then too, though.
Facts.
Yeah,
but a lot of that came from me just wanting to be out there. I didn't want to let my boys down. I didn't want to let my brothers down. So like I said, the doctors have to take the reins on this and say, this he's not well, coach. Tua, you're not good, bro. I don't care what you say. You're not well. You can't go back in this game. We're holding you out for the rest of this game. The doctors have to take the reins. And if they do, things will get better. They have to be a little bit more mindful of these situations. But until then, these Tua situations are going to keep happening.
Yeah. I think football is a violent sport. Injuries will happen. But we have to make sure that we're taking care of those players that have these type of head injuries, because we all love football, but if we continue to have parties that neglect to treat these players how they should be treated after having a head injury, then we're going to see, as I mentioned earlier, the sport die, because parents are not going to allow their kids to play football thinking of their future, whether the kid wants to play it or not. And so until we can get a grasp on how to handle this, or until the NFL gets a grasp on how to handle this, because they're the ones that we all watch on Sundays, then we're just gonna watch the sport die. Now, okay. Now I like pumpkin spice and all that shit. I like that stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
I think Matt Barnes knows way more than he's putting out. He just can't say what he want to say, but I think he knows at least 90% of the story, bro. At least.
Mikey, I hope you watched this, man. You was wrong for that.
You was wrong for that, my boy. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah.